So in this lesson we're going to talk all about how to get a van, because many people wonder when they're starting up, how should I do it? Should I buy a van? Should I lease a van? And there are different ways of doing it. So I wanted to teach you how I did it. Of course, everyone's in a different position, so you might find a different way is beneficial to you. But we're going to talk about these main two ways, buying versus leasing. So obviously, when you start your business, you're on a limited budget. So you might not have the money in the bank to be able to just buy a van outright. But obviously, as an electrician, you need a van, really. I mean, you could work out of the back of your car, but it wouldn't look very professional. Wouldn't be very convenient in terms of practical day-to-day working either. So you do really need a van. But if you've not got the money to actually buy a van, what can you do? Well, there are two options, leasing and renting, which both options could be beneficial to you. So renting is just what it says, like if you're going to rent, if you're going to move house for the day and you can rent a van to help you move house, you can actually rent a van for 1 day, 1 week, 1 month from rental companies. This is actually what I did when I started my business. I was living in Portugal, I was flying back to the UK for 1 week a month and I was renting a van for the week. Just an unmarked van from Thrifty or something like that, and then I would work out of it for the week and then I would just hand it back, and every time they give you a pretty much brand new van. Obviously it's not racked out and anything like that, but it gives you the vehicle that you need to actually do your work for that week. Now if you're renting on a short-term basis, it's very expensive. I think for a week it was probably like 200, 250 quid, which is quite a lot when you compare to leasing. So once I moved back to the UK and started running my business full time, I was faced with the option of buy or lease. And I had some money in the bank, but it was only enough to buy a really rubbish van, like 10 or 15-year-old van, a little bit beaten up. I could have probably spent a couple of grand to buy a van, but it wouldn't have been the most presentable looking van, shall we say. And it would have been at risk of breaking down and all those kind of worries that you get with buying a second-hand vehicle. So for me, buying wasn't really a good option, and what I decided to do is go down the leasing route. So leasing is essentially like long-term rental of a van. Instead of renting for a week or a month, you commit to rent that van for several years usually. So my first van that I leased for my company was a Ford Transit Connect. You know, it's the little Ford Transit, great little vans, really smart looking, lovely to drive, and enough space for all your basic stuff that you want as an electrician. So I chose to lease that van for 2 years to start with, because I didn't want to commit to too long term. And what you do is you set your mileage figure, your annual mileage figure, so depending on how far you're going to be travelling, you need to know roughly how many miles you're going to be doing per year. Because if you go over that, you will pay excess mileage, and if you go under it, you're paying more per month, but you're not actually using all your mileage. So you need to kind of calculate as accurately as possible how many miles you think you're going to be doing. For me, 10,000 a year was what I kind of estimated, and actually I ended up coming in lower than that. I was about 8,000, I think. And what you do usually with leasing is you pay up front for a certain number of months, and then that upfront kind of deposit that you pay reduces the monthly payments. So for me, I think I chose to pay 6 months up front, and it was like about £200 a month to rent lease a brand new Ford Transit Connect. Really nice little van. I paid a little bit extra to get a roof rack put on it, some roof bars, and get a pipe tube to go on there. I didn't get it all racked out at the start because I didn't have enough money to be able to actually buy racking, but that's something that when I got my second van, which is the Ford Transit Custom, then I did get it all racked out and everything because I had a bit of extra money to invest in the van. But the great thing about leasing, or contract hire as it's called, is that you have a brand new vehicle, you have it for a certain number of years, and then you just hand it back and you can basically get another one and have that for a few more years. So you've always got new vehicles. And what I chose to do was to get a maintenance package included. So that meant if anything goes wrong with it, or if you need to do a service on it, any kind of maintenance that needs doing, like new brake pads or discs or anything like that within the rental period, it's all covered in the maintenance, the monthly cost. So, you know, you can really budget easily if you have a lease van because you know this is my vehicle cost for the month, £200 a month, that's all I'm going to have to spend in terms of having a decent vehicle on the road, which is not likely to break down and cause service interruption. It's going to cost me less in fuel because it's a modern vehicle, it's going to be more efficient, it's going to look more presentable to my customers because turning up in a beaten old van maybe doesn't give the best impression that you want to be giving to your customers. So there are a lot of benefits to leasing if that's something that you want to go down. Now you will need to pass credit checks and things like that, so if you've got a poor credit history then you might struggle to lease a van, and then you might need to go down the buying route instead. But if you possibly can, I would recommend just to lease a van, because it's really worth doing to have that peace of mind knowing that you've got a decent van that looks good, it's going to be reliable, and you know exactly how much it's going to cost you every single month. The other side of things is buying a van. So if you've got the money, then it's actually more cost effective to buy a van than it is to lease a van, because obviously when you're leasing it, it's just like renting anything, you don't own it at the end of the process. So in a way, it's kind of like burning money if you're leasing it, but you've just got to view it as part of your business expense. Whereas if you own the van, then it becomes an asset of your business. Obviously that asset is going to depreciate over time and be worth less and less, and you will need to pay for the maintenance of it. But you might think, well, I've got the money to buy a brand new van, and actually that's better for me because I can have it for longer. I can kit it out with all the stuff that I want to kit it out with, all the mods and the racking and all that exciting stuff, without having to think about taking it out again at the end. And so, you know, you may prefer to just buy a van. Might be a second-hand van, in which case you can go somewhere like Auto Trader, and there's usually lots of second-hand vans for sale, although the market at the moment is a bit tricky. Sometimes you can get ex-lease vans that are like 3 years old, for example, they've done maybe 30 or 40,000 miles, and you can get them for a lot cheaper than if you were buying them new, so that can be good. Or you could buy a new van, but get it on like a pay-per-month kind of program where it's a loan basically, but against the van, but you do end up owning the van at the end of it. Sometimes you have to pay like a balloon payment once after a certain number of years to be able to really actually own the van. But the advantage of that is the VAT, because the VAT is taken off and things like that. So there are tax benefits to doing that. And if you go into a vehicle showroom, like go to your local Ford dealership or something like that, they'll talk you through all the options and then help you to find out what you can actually afford. They'll tell you what the different options are, how much it's going to cost you. So it's really worth just going in and sitting down with them and having a chat about it. And then in terms of pricing, it's good to know that you can kind of negotiate prices on vehicles, especially now when electric vehicles are becoming more popular. The sales of internal combustion engine vehicles are on the decrease, so the vendors are often desperate to sell and they've got quotas to meet. So you can really hammer them down on the price a lot of the time if you want and get a better deal. So for leasing, for example, what I did was I went online, got the cheapest price that I possibly could find online for a lease of the van that I wanted. And then I took that into my local dealer who basically said they would match it. But I got the local service, the benefit of that local service, but with the sort of global discounted price from Vanarama or whatever it was. So it's definitely worth to kind of try and negotiate on these kind of things if you can. And if you go for a second-hand van, obviously credit is not really usually an option, so you'll have to probably pay up front for the whole thing. So you need to have a certain amount in the bank to be able to do that, and depending on how much your budget is, you might not be able to get a very good reliable van, so you then have to budget a monthly amount or a yearly amount towards the maintenance and repair. And you also need to think about breakdown services, for example, so that if the worst case does happen and the van breaks down, you've got everything set up so that you can get recovered and your downtime in terms of work is reduced as little as possible. Because you don't want to end up having to phone customers saying, I'm really sorry, I can't get to you today, my van's broken down, you know. That's going to cost you a lot of money in the end, in lost work and wasted time. So for me, that's why I chose to lease a van. But as you can see, there are quite a few different options, and whichever option you choose is up to you based on your individual circumstances and your budget. But I hope that just me laying out these options for you gives you a kind of clearer picture of what might be the best option for you.